Oh, boy. I sure can't wait to do the video that everyone won't shut up about me doing. Woo! Okay, but with all seriousness, yes, it's finally here. The Kaiju Universe tier list. Thanks in advance for watching, if you watch the whole thing. Of course, there is the things I need to mention at the beginning. This is a ranking if the player is skilled at the Kaiju, max level, all that jazz. And it's also not just Kaiju A beats Kaiju B, because if we were going by Kaiju A beats Kaiju B, Mogira would be S+, and by the way, they're not S+. It's mostly overall power. Now, naturally, Kaiju in A tier will beat a Kaiju in B tier, because that's just too big of a gap. But, you know, if a Kaiju counters another Kaiju, then they counter another Kaiju. It's that simple. Okay. Now then. Man, there's so many Kaiju in the game now. Here we go. Anguirus attacks, force them into place. There's a damage delay. Hitboxes aren't great. DPS is okay, like in raw numbers and cooldowns, but just in general, everything else, no. Pretty good, fastest out of starters, has the most health out of starters. That's about it. Still usable, though, just not very usable. Mother Longlegs, since the last tier list, she got a small health buff, and by like, I think a little bit less than 400 HP, but her speed was lowered from 60 sprint to 50. Not the end of the world, though, because she's still, like, one of the I'm pretty sure it's, like, the fastest ground Kaiju. Tied with, like, I think it's Mothra Larva. But they also lowered her damage DPS, so overall she did get worse. She's tankier now, but she has less speed and less, damage output. Shin Form 3, nothing really changed. Yeah, that's about it. Okay, I'll go in depth. He has very mediocre melee power. Health is, not terrible. Okay speed, like, for swimming and ground. And he has blood spam, which is pretty meh. Yeah. Next is Kamada-kun. Kamada-kun, the reason overall it's better is, first of all, its melee DPS is actually nuts when it's maxed, the damage. He had, like, much higher than Shin Form 3's. It also does 20% extra damage in the water, so that's even more DPS. But also it has above average health regeneration, so it can recover from fights quicker. But obviously, it's a little bit slower, has a little bit less health, and has no ranged attack, so it kind of makes it so it's not that much above Shin Form 3 overall. Technically, Shin Form 3 can counter because it has a little bit more speed and a little bit more range, but hey, I'd say they're very close in power. Plus Shin Form 3 only costs 700 G-cells, so I think this current, placement isn't really too much to fuss over. Gojira. Pretty okay melee DPS. Atomic breath damage is slow, not much health. Small, so it's hard to hit, depending on what Kaiju you're fighting. And, yeah. I would say overall it's, it is the best starter overall. That's what I'm getting at. Next is Godzilla Jr., which is basically just a slight upgrade. It's basically a Gojira, but slightly upgraded. Tiny bit more speed, tiny bit more health, and a tiny bit more overall atomic breath power and melee power. Next are the Wendigo Crawler and the Skull Crawler. Same reasons as always. They're glass cannons. They have a super jump, decent speed. They, pump out a lot of damage, but they can get ranged out. Beams can hurt them pretty bad. hit and run flying kaiju, or just hit and run in general, or ranged attacks can hurt him pretty bad. So yeah. Next is Gazora, no longer king of C tier, but still really good for a C tier kaiju. Basically, if we're talking strictly land-based kaiju, if we're talking strictly on-land combat, it would just be in its own tier called Do Not Use This Tier. That's how bad it would be. But, in the water, it has 140 swim speed base, which is pretty nuts, and it does double damage in water. So it's basically like, it's like a piranha. It's super fast, super small, and it'll rip you apart. And then finally, Kumonga, who after the remodel got more melee power, a little bit more speed, but their web spam damage was dropped considerably. Still, I don't think that's bad because Kumonga's a cheap kaiju. You're not, there's not too much effort to gain it. But because it's more decent in melee, it's more forgiving for new players who don't know it relies on web spam. It's also really hard for this thing to get out of the water though, so heads up on that. Next is Manila. Overall, has max level of 200. Can do surprising amount of nasty DPS. Swim speed is okay. I believe it's 80 at the moment, which is not terrible. I know it's not. It's below the average speed, but it's faster than it used to be for a while, which was I think 70. Yeah, 70 for a long time. And now it's a lot better. Hitboxes are pretty crap though. Has no ranged attacks. Has no beam, no extended melee. Doesn't have much health, and even with max speed, you're not too fast on land. But for what it's worth, if you get it to level 200, you could surprise people with this thing. It's not bad. The worst out of the flyers, which says something considering it's low B when the worst kaiju are down here. But basically, Kamadov-kun has really good DPS output, really good damage. Melee spam, beam spam, has a pulse that can defend against beams, that can also do a little bit of damage, but I give you an idea, the average flight speed is 90, this thing's flight speed is 80, and it has the lowest health out of all flyers, if I'm correct. If not, then it's really down there, which is pretty bad, because if you're below the average speed, but you also have super low health, then you're kinda in trouble, if that makes sense, because, glass cannons, for example, have low health, but they have high speed and high damage. This thing has the high damage, but it has low speed and low health. That being said, it does have the upside of being able to swim at 90 speed, which isn't terrible. That's what stops it from dropping into C tier. Next is Mothra Larva. Really good melee spam damage. And it's also tied for fastest land kaiju alongside Mother Longlegs at 50. Has below average swim speed though of 80. Has struggles to get out of the water. Its web shot damage also isn't great. Doesn't have much health, but still it's insanely fast and does insanely strong spam, melee spam damage. I'd say it's a slightly higher budget Skull / Wendigo Crawler, which is ironic considering the fact that these cost Robux. Next is someone who I'm actually glad to have in B tier, Zombie Gigan, who got, first of all, both of his melee max damage is increased by 50 each. His melee cooldowns are slightly shortened, so, even more melee DPS. His beam DPS was increased. Beam was shortened, so he's less, vulnerable when using it, and the cooldown was shortened. Just overall, and Unrelenting Maim, which had a hitbox that only affected the top of Zombie Gigan, which made it hard to hit, short kaiju like Kamadov-kun, for example, it was updated so it covered his entire body. So he went from like low C tier to, you know, up into, you know, low B tier, which is pretty solid. Female Muto. Solid speed, solid health in the low 4000s. Good melee damage. Okay hitboxes. That's about it, though. It's basic, but not bad. The issues, though, it gets ranged out by ranged attacks, beam attacks. Flyers can hit and run and whittle it down because it's not good at hitting flyers a lot of the time. There's also kaiju that can do its job better, like Behemoth, Sela. You know, you know, it's like it's pretty good, but it gets outcompeted and countered by a lot of stuff. Generally speaking, anything fast with a beam, which is actually a lot when you think about it, or extended hitboxes can just bully it, unfortunately. But not awful by any means. Pretty solid. It's also fun to use. I highly recommend you do it. Titanus Mojura, or Titanus Mothra, or whatever you want to call it. Average health at 3,750. Average flight speed at 90. Really good melee damage, like really good. Has a blind move, God Rays. But its melee hitboxes are really bad, and it's really easy to hit its wings to avoid getting hit while you're hitting it. It's just a bad combination that really screws it over. Having bad melee hitboxes while also having a kind of wide hitbox yourself in aerial combat. Megaguirus. I don't know if I covered it in my last video, but her melee attacks, their charges got very, they got decreased a lot, which is one of its big issues. So now you can consistently, like, dish out a lot of damage with it and not have to worry about regen, which means you can actually, you know, be that one sociopath who goes max damage, max speed as the fastest flyer or kaiju in the entire game. Just go zoom. But the downside, and also has a high damage beam that does 1,600 damage, but your hitboxes are bad. It's so easy to hit Megaguirus when it's going in for a melee attack. Combine this with this low health, and it's really easy to just kill it as any decently bulky ground kaiju. And its beam has a long and loud charge up, which any ground kaiju with a faster charging up beam or that does solid damage can punish it. And again, if you have low health and you're easy to punish when you're doing your beam, that's kind of bad. But aside from that, not bad. Kamikaris. Had kind of slow for a flyer when it comes to flight speed, but on the ground it's also really quick, which most flyers don't have the benefit of having. It also has insane melee DPS, which is really good, decent hitboxes, but has one major flaw for a flyer, and that is it cannot attack while flying. It strictly relies on flying as an escape method. So yeah. You're basically like a ground kaiju with a flight as an escape option, which, you know, not bad. Health ain't that great either, but honestly, I'd say it's still fun to play as. Male Muto, strike attack hits twice, which means you have, for example, you just have a lot of damage potential. I believe the strike does like 380, and if you can hit that twice, that's 760 for every time you use it. It just, you know, you gotta practice with it. It's good at hitting kaiju below you as it aims down, so you're good at harassing ground kaiju. Against flyers, though, this strat is kind of meaningless because they can fly away, and you can trade hits. So you can land that 380 hit, but your second hit is just not going to hit them because they're going to fly past you or away from you. You also have the benefit of being able to fly and swim at both decent speeds. Flight speed being 85, swim speed being 90. Health is around 3,100-ish, I believe. So not terrible. Overall decent. And then Sela, Slightly less melee DPS than female Mewtwo, and a little bit slower, but swim speed is much faster, and your range, your melee range, is nasty. So it's really hard for flyers to punish you with their melee. You're basically a female Mewtwo that can defend itself better against flyers and can swim faster. Just, you still have all the other issues female Mewtwo has, though. Next is 2014. Pretty good melee damage. Oak, decent health at 4,200-ish. Kind of slow for a ground kaiju at 23 speed. Swim speed is solid at 90. Has a damage, does 20% extra damage in the water. Your atomic breath does solid damage too, but the charge up is really long, and the cooldown is pretty long. So anything that's faster than you and has a solid beam, that's kind of a quick cool up time, can beat you in a beam fight, or just punish you. Basically any flyer with a beam, or any fast kaiju with a beam. Except maybe something... No, actually, yeah, no. You can either get punished or beamed faster. Next is Manda. Has 3,000 health, can swim really quick in the water. Speed on land is okay. Melee DPS is pretty solid. Boiling water breath is okay. You also do 10% more damage in the water. But another gimmick. This is a bit of a gimmick, but you can, because of the way the bottle is designed, you can stick your head through a wall and beam people through the wall without them being able to beam back. Because instead they'll just hit whatever structure you're, hitting. Like, let's say it's a hill, a building, a beach, whatever. It's an interesting gimmick that's good for starting fights, if you know how to use it. Showa Godzilla, Showa Godzilla, who can essentially do everything, quote-unquote. He can swim at 90 speed, he can fly at 70 speed, and he can walk on land. He can't run, unfortunately, but his melee DPS is solid. You can also, airdrop to use your melee attacks in the air. This is hard to pull off, but since this is, for a skilled, tier list for, like, skilled / max level kaiju, it qualifies. But the problems are, when flying, without doing those fancy tricks, you can only do punch. On the ground, you can't sprint, which means you can get ranged out, and it's hard to, land all your attacks doing that. And on water, you can only do punch as well, so it's like you can do all three, you can fight on all three platforms, technically, but you're restricted no matter where you are. Like, you're heavily restricted regardless of what scenario you're in. So you have to be really good at adapting into different scenarios when using this thing. Jet Jaguar, pretty good speed, 37. Melee damage is, decent, okay. Health is kind of low at 2,800. Super beam damage is good. Just overall, a pretty decent hit and run kaiju. Not bad at all. Turkey Rodan. Technically, I'd say it's the weakest out of the Rodans, the weakest melee damage, but and has a beam, but it's eh. But honestly, it's still good. It's still a good kaiju. Hitboxes are decent. Beam does solid damage. Your melee attacks still don't do terrible damage. Just the hitboxes for the melee attacks are eh. Overall, you're not bad. Not bad. Just compared to the other Rodans, maybe. And finally, Kamibis does bonus damage in the water as well. I believe it's 10%. Has self-heal. That heals roughly half or a little bit less than half of its base health. Melee damage at base is pretty decent. Speed on land isn't bad either, but it cannot defend itself against flyers or kaiju with beams, or kaiju that can simply just shred through health and burst through its self-heal. That being said, I wouldn't recommend you do, self-heal in front of them anyway. You're better off just going into the water and doing that, and then coming back for round 2. And now we move into A tier. And first up, to start us off, if I can find them, we have a tie between Godzilla 2019 and Kong 2017. Godzilla 2019 has decent melee DPS, has 20% damage bonus in the water, and because it can use both of its melees, it can combo in the water with that damage bonus, which is lethal. Atomic Breath damage is decent, cooldown's kind of long, and melee hitboxes aren't that great, but overall its stats aren't terrible, and it has some benefits. Kong, meanwhile, has less health, no beam, swims a little bit slower in the water, and has no bonus damage, but has better melee hitboxes, mobility on land is much better, has a super jump, and overall has more melee DPS too. So, it's kind of like Kong 2017 is better on land, and Godzilla 2019 is better for land and water. You'll see a similar comparison in the future. Next is Frostbite Godzilla. Take 2019, buff its health up a bit, improve its hitboxes a bit, but make it slower on land. And that's basically Frostbite, if I had to sum it up pretty well. Heisei Mothra, basically with your whirlwind attacks and, well, yeah, essentially whirlwind attacks, your fast flight speed, you can harass almost all ground kaiju, because there are a few exceptions. But it does horrendously against other flyers, because it doesn't have much health, like 2,500. Its melee damage is pathetic, and its beam isn't as strong as it used to be, so it can get punished for that. So yeah. Biollante, a really good tank. Melee damage is okay. Acid spew damage is okay. Health is really good. I believe it's like 4,900 at base. And has absolutely insane health regeneration. Like it can take a lot of hits, and it can recover from fights really quick and dish out decent damage in return. The issue is that 1, you're big, 2, you're slow, and 3, it takes only 1 damage to deny regen in the game. So it's like, it's kind of easy to deny that self-heal when it's slow moving. It's big and easy to hit, and it only takes 1 damage to deny it, so. Unfortunately. Final War is a jack of all trades for Godzilla's, essentially. He can do everything. Good melee? Check. Good atomic breath? Check. Good swim speed? 100? Check. But he doesn't, and he has good hitboxes? Check. But he doesn't excel at anything, if that makes sense. He can do everything that most ground Godzillas can do, but he doesn't excel in those categories. Like, some will do better than him in certain aspects, but he can do good at everything. He does everything well. Listen, I'm sure you all get the idea. And here's the person who everyone assumes is either S tier or S+, because it counters Destroya, which, by the way, it doesn't. Well, no, I'm sorry, that was stupid of me. Yes, Mogira does counter Destroya. You are correct in that regard. I will give you that. Mogira also basically counters / harasses almost every ground kaiju in the game. I will give you that as well. But let's put it against something like, again, this is like when both players are max level and skilled, okay? Let's put it against a, Turkey Rodan that knows how to dodge and hit with melee. A Megaguirus that knows how to bait out attacks with its insane speed and punish with melee. Okay, now this thing can't beat it. Titanus Mogira. Actually, no, that's not either. Here, let's go down here. Here we go. Mechagodzilla, who is small and nimble, can dodge beams and return beams. Also has better melee. King Ghidorah, small, nimble, high melee damage, high beam damage. Heisei Rodan, fast, good melee, can dodge attacks. Voodoo Rodan, or Voodon, who basically has a beam, has good melee, but it also has a cloud attack that defends it against beams. Literally all the Ghidorahs in the game, which are good at rush down melee and just punishing you. Gigan, who has high speed, is good at melee rushing you. Titanus Rodan is good at melee rushing you. Batra, there you go. All those kaiju in the hands of a skilled player can punish a Mogira because Mogira's melee attack is pretty mediocre. Not the best hitbox and not the best cooldown. So yeah, that's why I don't think Mogira is S tier or let alone S+. Yes, it can counter-destroy and basically harass every ground kaiju. If you ask me, it's like the Heisei Mothra scenario, but it defends itself better because it's cancerous beam attacks. That's about it. Volcanic Biollante. Basically, you take Biollante, lower its health a bit, increase its speed by a decent amount, and then also increase its damage. So basically, Biollante, but a little bit less health, but higher speed and higher damage. Still suffers from the same issues, though. Big, easy to hit, regen gets denied pretty easily, unfortunately. Shin Godzilla, who I would say is designed to be anti-aerial kaiju. You have insane beam damage. You can combo your tail beam and your main primary atomic breath. Back beams does insane damage, has a insane hitbox radius. You can combine back beams with other attacks like the primary beam, tail whip. You also have really good health regen. But your actual melee damage outside of comboing back beams and tail whip is poop. You're super slow, and you basically rely on those beams. So it's really, really easy to melee rush a Shin. I will say, Shin in the water is pretty terrifying, but he's not invincible. There are certain kaiju that could rival him. I wouldn't say outright beat him, but give him trouble in the water if they outplay him. As I said, he can get melee rushed pretty easily. And certain flyers, because here's the thing, his back beams counts as part of his hitbox. Like his hurt box, essentially. So, let's say you got a flying kaiju with a decent amount of health who could tank those hits. Monster Zero, perfect example. You use back beams, you're thinking, aha, I got him right where I want him. But the Monster Zero is smart, just like you. And it basically goes, ah ha ha, actually, I'm going to bite your back beams, then do body slam and bite again, and I'll out damage your back beams. And basically you're like, well, crap. That's not good. Because it'll out damage you, and monster, it'll out damage you. This can also apply to Mecha King Ghidorah, I'd say Titanus Rodan, because its damage output is bonkers with melee. It was, at least when it can hit a target. Destroya. Yeah. So, what is supposed to help you can also be bad against you if you're going against bulky flying kaiju that know what they're doing. But against the more lightweight kaiju with less health, a lot less health, and basically rely on not getting hit and not trading hits, yeah, you do better against those kaiju. Speaking of, next is Titanus Rodan. Solid 3,700 health, really quick, 105 flight speed, really good melee damage, like really good. But the downside is its melee hitboxes aren't too great, and it can kind of struggle against other flyers because of that, but it doesn't do terrible, because, again, its hitboxes I wouldn't say are terrible, but there are moments where it's like, you're supposed to hit something, but it's like, no. Just no. There's no explanation. The game just decided no. Unfortunately. It sucks. But not much you can do about that, unfortunately. But overall, really good kaiju. Would highly recommend you play it. Millennium Godzilla, basically take the idea of a high self-healing tank, you know, like Biollante or Volcanic Biollante, high regen, and basically Millennium Godzilla, although having less health, does that better. Has better melee damage, smaller and harder to hit, and although slow, as said, it's harder to hit. The amount of health it heals in contrast to its base/maximum health is even higher than these two. And it has what I would like to call crowd control abilities. Now, we all know Millennium Godzilla's Pulse and Atomic Breath do insane amounts of damage. And I would say, not only are they good at starting a fight, but especially the Pulse, they're good at keeping away targets. And if you can force the target to go away from you, and at least get even a little bit, few ticks of healing, that's a couple hundred health back. Boom. It's much better at these two because it still can control an area of space to give itself moments to heal and possibly damage targets, and its damage moves, although having super long charge-ups, are good to start off fights. But it still does suffer from the fact that 1 damage is all that it takes to deny that regen, and you can melee rush it when it's doing its long charge up if you're willing to tank whatever damage it's about to, you know, release. So, you know, the strategy's not foolproof, but it can work. And here's Batra. Now, you take the aspects of Mothra here, right? But instead, you give it an extra 200-ish health, and you bump up its damage, right? It has pretty meh beam, but its melee damage is so much better. Overall, just way better. Hitboxes are good too. And it's still capable of, you know, bullying ground kaiju. Not as well as, you know, Heisei Mothra, but still pretty well. Of course, its downsides, as said, are similar to Heisei Mothra's. Not much health. Beam is kind of long, and it doesn't do the most damage. Do solid damage, but not the most. So, you know, there's that. But overall, it's not bad. Do not sleep on Batra. It's pretty good. Next up is Showa Mechagodzilla. Basically, how do I put this? Okay, you know, here, how about this? We take Mogira, we lower its health a bit, but we make it a lot smaller, a lot harder to hit. We increase its damage output, we give it more attack moves and utility, and there you go. Oh, we also lower its beam damage a bit. But overall, I'd say it is an improvement over Mogira simply due to the fact that it has more utility, it's harder to hit, more consistent melee damage. Overall, I'd say it's an improvement. And my throat is... I'm gonna be real with you guys, my throat is dry right now. I'm gonna need a drink after this. Gigan, small, nimble, quick, hard to hit. Pretty solid melee damage. Melee hitboxes are pretty solid too. Beam damage is pretty good, but its health is really bad. What else am I thinking of? I'd say that's about it. It just has low health. Oh, I also know what else. The cost of its beam is kind of high. And it's only the one beam. You only have one beam, you know? And it doesn't have the most utility, but it's still... He's simple. Gigan is simple. Melee, rushdown, slash, dog, you know, beam reliant kaiju. It can do multiple... It can do two different play styles, basically. That, and it can punish Mogira if you know what you're doing. Now, granted, because you don't have that much health, Mogira, if it lands its shots, can punish you. It really depends on skill. It depends on skill. Yeah, it's not like a direct win. Like, if you do win, you'll probably be low in health for every win, if that makes sense. Now. Heisei Rodan. We have has really good melee damage, like really good hitboxes, really high speed. Fire transformation gives it like a very small damage buff to its already solid damage slash spammable attacks. It also gives it a beam. Now, granted, that beam has a very long charge up, and I would say it's situational. but it's not a bad beam whatsoever. The damage output's pretty solid. But yeah, I'd say, you know, more health than Gigan, more overall damage than Gigan, quicker than Gigan. It's just a better Gigan. Then there's Showa King Ghidorah, which I believe is like Heisei Rodan, but give it a little bit more health, lower its speed a bit, buff up its melee damage, and remove the restriction of needing to be level 50 for your beam, and that's Showa King Ghidorah. Has good hitboxes and everything. It's really good. I would say it's also another destroy counter, simply because it's quick and has really solid beam damage that you can have a relatively short cooldown. Vudon, that's what I'm gonna call it, Vudon. From what I've seen, has slightly less health than Heisei Rodan. Overall speed, I believe, is slightly quicker, but not by much, because it's Mach Assault, which it can spam. It has two different beam, well, quote-unquote beam options. One's basically like a spew attack. It's kind of hard to land all of it, but its actual beam attack for when it reaches higher levels, it's basically the same as Heisei Rodan's, but it's like kind of more burst damage. Has the long charge up and everything though. Melee damage is pretty good, similar to Heisei Rodan's. But what really puts it above it, despite having a little bit less health and a little bit less melee damage, I would say, is potions. And like I believe it's like, I don't know the exact name, but it summons like a cloud. It's like I'm gonna call it the Black Cloud. It summons like a cloud of bats, I believe, which if you use it, it'll defend you against like beam attacks, and it damages anything nearby you. And potions, which granted, limited usage until you respawn, but you can just menu to fix that. So that's what puts it above Heisei Rodan and Showa King Ghidorah. You know, despite, honestly, yeah, it's just out. Yeah. I think I explained my point. Actually, I don't need to delve any further before I, you know, start scrambling with my words. The most recent addition is Ready Player One Mechagodzilla, with overload or overcharge or something like that. Its damage output is insane. You can use that for before any attack you use. When you hit 100%, you get a bonus one for free. All of your attacks are good. You also have a salvo / missile attack, which with range, not as much as like, let's say, Mecha 2021, but it's still decent. You have a atomic flamethrower attack, which although you cannot aim, it's good at ranging ground targets. Overall, you're also insanely quick, 35 speed on land, but I'd say the best way to describe it is you're a really good glass cannon that pumps out insane, and I mean insane amounts of damage. But you cannot do well against flyers because you cannot... Well, flyers with beams, I should say. Flyers with beams because you can't aim the atomic flamethrower. And you're restricted to walk when you use, like, your utility moves. Like, your Stomp, AoE Stomp, which I didn't mention because it's not terrible, but the range isn't insane either. Okay, the reason it does insane damage, I forgot to mention this, but it's because I'm having a brain fart. I'm sorry, guys. It's because the overcharge gives a damage buff to whichever move you use next. There we go. I found my words, guys. But because it's limited to walking for its extra utility moves, and it can't aim its atomic flamethrower, it's restricted to A tier. Mind you, it's second best of A tier. We're about to end it. Titanosaurus, only one thing changed about it. It does 10% more damage in the water. Because it already has 120 swim speed, that's pretty nuts. It makes good usage of that. Pretty self-explanatory. Has a super jump based off of your health. Pretty decent speed. Has good extended ranged attacks with melee. Your beam attack is pretty good. Just overall, you're a pretty solid kaiju. And Behemoth, basically, you're a brawler. Just straight up a brawler. You have really good melee damage. You have really good base health. Like, I believe it's like 5100. You have really good range. You have a self-heal that heals like roughly a fourth of your base health. But you also have a really good stomp / AoE attack. But the issue is you're super slow. You have 20 sprint speed, which is really slow for a ground kaiju. You also have below average swim speed at 80. What sucks about that is that anything with like ranged attacks, like Titanosaurus, for example, or Ready Player One's, missile attacks or its atomic flamethrower, will harass you. Any flyer with a beam can harass you. Any decently quick ground kaiju or ground kaiju that has some distance on you with a beam can harass you. Basically, beams and extended attacks are your downfall because you're so slow. Heisei King Ghidorah, solid melee, solid beam damage, decent flight speed, health is decent too, 4200. It can also combo while doing its beam, so you can, the usual tactic of punishing / melee rushing someone while flying, and they're beaming, or just in general, it can just counter that and get a free beam off. It's capable of a lot of things. Yeah. I wouldn't say there's no blatant weakness to this thing. It has good hitboxes too, but I guess there's just certain kaiju that overall are better than than it. For example, Mecha King Ghidorah. A little bit extra health, 300 more health, 4,500. Slightly stronger beam, slightly stronger melee attacks, and has a force field that can defend itself against beams. So basically, a slightly beefed up King Ghidorah in terms of stats, but with also the utility of a force field. Next up is another tie between Godzilla 2021 and Kong 2021. Now, Godzilla basically has really good melee damage on land, pretty solid speed for a ground kaiju, has 20% bonus damage in the water, has strong atomic breath of like 2,000 damage over 4 seconds, pretty solid hitboxes, good health, just overall a very good kaiju. But it also has its own hurt box, is kind of tallish, which means you can get punished by flyers easily. You can also just be punished by anything that's faster than you and has a ranged attack, like Titanosaurus, for example. But you're still not bad by any means. It's a really solid, it's a really high-ranking kaiju, obviously. I mean, heck, watch Tricky Godzilla 2021. He can show you how capable that thing is. It's good. Now, I don't think I ever got a chance to put him in the last tier list. Now, I will say, on release, Kong 2021 was S+. He was like the third best. Above Burning, but below Mecha and Destroya. But he did get nerfed. The healing from his Le Fiche was lowered. And the amount of energy drained from his axe, like the axe dive, was increased. So, he has... But basically, I'd say he has really fast speed, really good mobility. He has more melee DPS than 2021, but less health. He also can block attacks with his axe, like more, and parry melee attacks or block pulses and beams, whatever. And he can also, with the axe dive, he can range targets. Of course, it's very limited now due to the energy drain nerf. But overall, I would say basically it's a far more mobile, has more melee DPS and slight ranging capabilities compared to G21, but he has less health, he's slower and has no damage bonus in the water, and plus he doesn't even maintain the axe, so I just keep them at balance between each other. I'd say that's a pretty fair win-win, so that way no side gets angry at the other. Plus, I would say they are pretty even. Oh my god. I really need a drink. Heisei got another tie, by the way. This is the last tie, I promise. I swear. Heisei Godzilla and Thermo Godzilla. Heisei basically got a buff to which, originally he had like a stationary mode, which increased its damage by 10% at the cost of not being able to move when attacking. Meanwhile, but they recently buffed it, so now it gives him 25% extra damage, which is pretty impressive. Basically, get maximum rage, go stationary mode, and go ham on anyone that you can get your hands on, and you will rip them apart. It also makes your atomic breath just that much more lethal, which is extremely spammable. Rage does not, and stationary mode does not increase your pulse damage, unfortunately, but hey, what can you do? Good hitboxes, decent health at like 4,200 or 4,300 base. Rage rush, or your rush attack, keep it simple, gives you a little bit extra mobility when you're in a pinch, but your base speed is 23, so, or 20, yeah, 23, so you're not too quick. Overall, really good. Now, the reason he's tied with Thermo is because Thermo relies more on melee. Thermo has insane melee power as well, also has a pulse which helps it do well in melee combat, has more health. It's not restricted to being stationary when having that insane melee, but Thermo has no ranged options. He has no extended ranged attacks, and he has no beam. That's basically why he's, tied with Heisei. Next is Monster Zero. I really don't think I need to explain any further. Really insane health, solid flight speed of 80. For what it's worth, yes. Strong melee damage, good melee hitboxes. It's simple, but it's really effective. It's really bulky and effective, but its downsides are below average health regen, like its health regen is comparable to G21's in terms of raw numbers, despite having like an extra 2,000 health. And the beam is absolute crap. Kiryu, actually, I'm having a last second thought here. You know what, guys? The more I think about it, swap them. No. I will say, yeah. I would say that's that. I'd say yeah. But I'll still cover Kiryu. We already know Monster Zero, but basically Kiryu has Mobilization Barrage, which is an extended / range attack, high speed, has 2 beams, which if you get enough charge put into your skill points, you can use them both in quick succession. Really strong melee attacks. Just overall, you have a lot of utility. The Mobilization Barrage can be used for buildings if you're strategic with it. Just overall, he's really good. Has a lot of utility. Pretty strong attacks. Just not the most health for a kaiju of this tier. In fact, he has the lowest health out of everyone in S tier, like 3,800 base. Absolute Zero will take away 700 of your health, though, so keep that in mind, so you might die. And finally, Berserker's Rage, the Roar attack. If you use it at 33% of your health or less, or basically a third of your health or less, you will gain a really solid damage buff and a solid speed buff until you hit 50% health or more. So yeah, really solid utility. Meanwhile, Monster Zero, although having much less utility, it's just so good at brute forcing and ranging. It's just that effective at doing it that it doesn't require nearly as much effort, and it's just that effective. Burning, who got a buff. Basically, I believe Meltdown gave you a damage bonus of 15%, but now it gives you a damage bonus of 25%. He's still third best, but that's not. But I will say the gap between him and Mechagodzilla 2021 is much closer now. Granted, I never got to officially test it, but right now I believe Mechagodzilla 2021 is still, you know, stronger than Burning by a fair amount. I believe, I don't know if I covered this in the last video, but Mechagodzilla 2021's beam attack devastates now. It used to do 2,300 damage over the course of 8 seconds, had a 45-second cooldown. Now, it does 3,000 damage over the course of 6 seconds and has a 40-second cooldown. And to top it off, Turbo Punch is now 15% faster, so now you can actually properly combo. The stab attack also does 755 damage now. Overall, Mechagodzilla truly is the second best kaiju in the game, and is the best ground kaiju, period. Creeping Salvo range is insane. You can combine it with the dash. Dash, by the way, gives you extra mobility, just insane mobility, high speed. You can combine the dash with the Invigorated Kick and just do insane AoE damage. An Invigorated Kick on its own just has insane range and good damage. He can just do so much. He can do so much. And finally, Destroya. I'm not going to bother explaining this because, first of all, my voice, my throat is really dry, but most importantly, I'm sure we all know. We already know Destroya. The only things I will comment on is that both of its beams combined can be spammed together, like, you know, for a one-time usage, and do 4,900 damage in total at max. And you can also use Variable Slicer or Tail Whip, like in the last second of Floral Beam. So yeah, that is the Kaiju Universe tier list. This was recorded on November 24th, 2021. And yes, I'm aware there's going to be a FEMA Mewtwo remodel tomorrow, but honestly, can't be bothered. Plus, you guys have been wanting this video for a long time. I decided, you know what? I'll do it. And I genuinely hope you enjoyed this. Oh man. Because my throat might be dead. But you know what, guys? Anyway, have a good one. See ya.